Okay, so let's see the Heilige Gemara. Matzka Flor Rav Huna. Rav Huna is asking a kasha on the Yosy that Rav said that whenever it's repeated, whenever there's something that's repeated by a mincha, that means it's la'akiv. Harei melach, the loy tana bekra, the chiyuv to salt the koimates, that's not repeated in the pasuk, uma'akva bei, and it is ma'akiv. The Tanya we learned in the Brisa, Beris melach oilam hu, the Beris melach is forever, shetahei, Beris amura b'melach, there's a covenant by melach that every carbon always has to have melach. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Shimon does not argue on the halacha of Rabbi Yehuda, but Rabbi Shimon learns it from a different pasuk. Rabbi Shimon Omer nemer kan bris melach olam hu, v'nemar lahalon bris kahunas olam. Kashem she'yefshir l'karmon is below kahuna. Just like the bris kahunas forever, and the kohen always has to be makiv the korban. Kach yefshir l'karbonos below melach. So we hear the halacha that melach is ma'akiv by all karbonos, including a mincha. According to Rav, it's only the case if it's repeated again. Rabbi Yosef, maybe Rav holds not like this brisa, and he argues Sayan Rabbi Yehuda and Sayan Rabbi Shimon, and he holds like our Mishnah. Rav ketana didon svirle, the Omar loy melach, loy molach kosher. Our Mishnah Befer says if you didn't put salt, it will be kosher. It's not ma'akiv. Why? Because Rav holds it wasn't repeated twice. Amalei Abaye, Zokta Abaye. Ihachi, we should learn that pshat by Lo Yatzak as well. Lo Yatzak Nami, Lo Yatzak Klal. And we know for sure, if you didn't make Yatzak, it is ma'akiv. As we learned in Rashi and the Mishnah, that Yitzika is repeated twice. Ella, what are you going to have to learn pshat? Like we learned originally, Lo Yatzak Koyin Elazar. Avada the Yitzika was made, but it was made through a zar, and that's when it's kosher. So Ibazoi, maybe that's pshat in our Mishnah as well by Melicha. Hachanami Lo Molach Koyin Elazar. But our Mishnah also holds that Melicha is ma'akiv. So it's tzedek shver on Rav. Why is Melika ma'akiv? Omer lei. So Rabbi Yosef told Abaye, what type of kash is that? V'chisala al daitach shezar korev legab mizbeach. What are you talking about? The Mishnah is saying if a zar made melicha, melicha has to be done on the mizbeach, as Rashi says. The melicha is koymetz b'roish yishom mizbeachi. A zar can't go to the mizbeach. So if melicha is done, it could only be done by the kohen. So if the Mishnah says loy malach, it has to mean loy malach klal. So you have a raya from our Mishnah that our Mishnah holds that melicha is not ma'akiv, which stems with Rav Shita, that if it wasn't repeated, it's not ma'akiv. V'boy sema, it is ma'akiv. And Rav is muddy that it's ma'akiv. It wasn't repeated, but there's another reason why it's ma'akiv. Even the ksiva bei bris, since it uses the word bris by melach, abund, command the tana bei kradami. That's just as good as a reason why it should be ma'akiv, even though it wasn't said twice. Frek the Gemara, v'loy tana beikra. Are you telling me that the pasuk doesn't repeat the chiyuv to make melicha by a mincha? We have a pasuk actually. V'haksiv, it says in the pasuk, v'chol karban minchascha v'melach timlach. So there you see it's repeated by the karban mincha. Zok Gemara, if it was stam repeated, then you have an extra pasuk that makes it be makiv. But there it's repeated for a very specific reason, to qualify what karbanis require malicha. Not everything requires malicha, only specific karbanis. How do we know which ones require malicha? Because of this brisa that uses the pasuk of the kol karbancha, the chol karban minchas of melach timlach. From there we know what needs malicha. For the rest of the Gemara today, we're going to be analyzing this brisa. It says in the brisa as follows: Ilu nemar korban b'melach. If it just said korban b'melach, not korban minchascha. I think it's kedai to look at the pasuk, the whole pasuk, to get clarity, because we're going to be spending a lot of time on this pasuk. It says in the pasuk, "V'chol korban minchascha b'melach timlach, v'loi sashbish melach brisel lekecha me'al minchascha." And then at the end of the pasuk, it repeats it again, "Al kol korbancha takriv melach." So the Gemara is going to now darshan, the Bryce is going to darshan this pasuk in great detail. Ilu nemar korban b'melach, and it didn't say minchascha, then shoymei ani, I would have understood that it means afilu eitzim v'dam. Even karbanos of eitzim, there's such a thing as a carbon eitzim, someone who brings eitzim as a carbon by itself, or dam, the dam that we spritz from every carbon. I would have thought that they also require malicha. Why? Shenikru carbon. They're also a carbon. So if it says the whole carbon b'melach timlach, then it should include dam and the carbon eitzim as well. Talmud Leimer of a kol carbon mincha b'melach timlach. So we learn that in order to have a chiv malicha, it has to be similar to the carbon mincha. So let's analyze what characteristics, what features does a carbon mincha has, and then any carbon with a similar feature will also have a chiv melach. Ma mincha miyuchedesh, shacherim boin chayvolah. Just like the mincha, it's mechayiv other things. Rashi says that means primarily it means you need eitzim. Because the mincha, you have to be makrib on the mizbeach. In order to be makrib on the mizbeach, you need eitzim to burn it. So just like mincha triggers that eitzim have to be brought, av kol, so to all other karbonos. Shacherim boin chayvala, that other things have to be brought because of it, like wood. Only those karbonos would be mechuyev in melach. So that automatically excludes eitzim v'dam. A carbon eitzim doesn't need eitzim because it itself is the eitzim. Dam is not mechayiv eitzim because dam doesn't have to be burnt. Dam is just put onto the mizbeach. So therefore, those two karbonos or akravos are excluded from the chiv of melach. Frag the Gemara, who said that that's how you should analyze it? Maybe there's other features of mincha that we should say are required to have a chiv melach, such as ima mincha meyuchedes shemateres av kol shematir. Just like the kemitza, when you're maktir it, it's matir di shirayim. So too, anything that's a matir, if it's matir something else, that should require malicha. Ovidam shematir, and based on that criteria, dam is similar to a mincha, and after I should be mechuyev to salt dam, and it only excludes a carbon of eitzim, because eitzim is not matter anything. Talmud Leimer, me al minchascha v'loy me al damcha. The pasuk says al minchascha takriv melach. It doesn't say al damcha. It says al minchascha. Me al minchascha. So that's a pasuk that's memayit dam. Zog to Gemara. Yochol te mincha kula te'una melach. I would have thought that not just the shirayim needs melach, but even not just the koimitz needs melach, but who had in the shirayim also needs melach. Talmud Leimer carbon toun melach vein mincha kula te'una melach. The carbon, the part that we're makrib on the mizbeach, that's the part that needs melach. But the rest of the carbon, the shirayim, does not require melach. Mainly ala koimetz. I would only know that the koimetz needs melach. Minayin l'rabbi says halavoina. What about lavoina that's also a matir, that also requires eitzim? Maybe that should also. How do we know that requires melach? So that's a big problem. Why is that a big problem? Because we just said that the rules are, if it needs eitzim to burn it, then it's included in the kalal of karbanis that need melach. So why should lavoina be different? Why is the brisa even asking minayin l'rabbi says halavoina? Levina fits perfectly in to the description, to the feature that it needs eitzim. The Gemara is going to ask that kasha later. But the Brisa answers, Mar ba'niyas haLevina shekein bo ima bekli echad. The Levina and the Mincha are brought together in one keli. They're hukva in one keli. So therefore it has a din of a Mincha, and it'll also need melech. Minayin l'Rabbi says haLevina haba b'fnei atzma. What about if you just brought a carbon Levina by itself? How do you know such Levina requires melech? Or Levina haba b'bezichen? Or the Levina that are brought to be matir, the lechem aponim, or vaketayras, which are put onto the mizbeach, or the minchas kayanim, which are all placed on the mizbeach, minchas kayin Mashiach, which is the daily chavitin that's also put on the mizbeach, minchas nesachim, or the emurei chatos, ve'emurei asham, ve'emurei kachim kachim, which Rashi says are referring to the shalmei tzibur of atzeres that are considered kachim kachim, ve'emurei kadosh from kalam like every shlomim, ve'vorei oila, ve'oila sa'oif. Minayin, how do you know that all these karbonis have the chiyuv of melach? Talmud loimer al kol karboncha takriv melach. That is the brisa. So we've answered why you need this extra pasuk by mincha, not for ikuv, but to teach us what type of karbonos require melach. And now we're going to analyze this brisa because it has some shverkaten like we've already raised. Omar mar. Ainli ela kaimetz minayin l'rasot. How do we know that Levon is also in the category of items that share a feature with mincha that require melicha? Zog the Gemara. Marba ani es halavoina. You know why a marba lelevoina? Shekein bo ima bechli echad. That's what the Brisa said. Fragt the Gemara, was darf ich das haben? I don't need any special limud, special reason for levoina. Via amrit ma mincha miyuchedes shacherim bo imchayvala. And that's, levoina fits right in. So why do we need a special svara for levoina? Zog the Gemara, hachi kamar. What the Brisa is really discussing is just using levoina as a catalyst to ask a kasha. Because let's take a look at the pasuk. It says, "V'chol karbon minchascha takriv melach." V'chol karbon is a klal, including all karbonos. Minchascha is a prat. So maybe you should say, "Ein bechlal ela masher b'prat," only a mincha and nothing else. That's what the Gemara meant to ask when the Gemara said, "How do you know levoina?" So let's look back inside to the Gemara. Zog Gemara, hachi kamar. This is what the Brisa is asking. Ema karbon is klal, umincha is prat, and klal uprat ein bechlal ela mashe beprat. The only karbonos that are included in the chiyuv of salt, mincha in midi achrina loy. Hadar amar zog the Brisa. The Brisa, the pasuk at the end says another line, another phrase. Hadar amar. Al kol karboncha, that's chosar v'cholal. So now you have a klal pratu klal. How do we darshan a klal pratu klal? Iyatadon elo ke'ena prat. It has to be similar. Anything that will be included in the chiyuv melech has to be similar to the prat of mincha. Ma prat mufurish she'acherim boin chayvala. Just like the mincha, it requires that eitzim be brought to burn the mincha. Of course, so to all items, she'acherim boin chayvala. Okay, gewaltig. Acherim, the boin chayvala, mind you, what do we mean? Something else needs to be brought for it. We know the answer already, but now the Gemara is asking it beferish. Ma'niu eitzim. Any carbon that requires that eitzim should be brought to burn it, such an item needs to be salted. Av kol eitzim. Freit Gemara, maybe ema levoina. Let's say it should be levoina because let's say that. What does it mean? What does it mean? Acherim bo chayvala. Who said it means to burn it? Maybe it means it needs like a co-matir, like the kaimitz requires the levoina with it. And you don't learn that it means eitzim. Rather, maybe it means levoina. And therefore, what's similar to that? but I see dam. Therefore, dam should need melicha. You know why? The ika nisachim. Nisachim and dam are similar. They have a partnership similar to the koimetz and the levaina. Frank the Gemara, what are you talking about? The levaina and the koimetz are two komatirin. They work together. They're buddies. But what does dam have to do with nisachim? So Gemara, nisachim bahade emurin uda also. The nisachim are brought with the emurim. They're not brought with the dam. Why in the world would you be meshadach and say that nisachim and dam are buddies? I'll tell you why. My timer, achila usashia. The achila of the mizbeach, is the dam, and the shasiya is the nisachim. I'm sorry, for carrot. The emurim are the achila, and the shasiya is the nisachim. So the Gemara's kash is good. The dam doesn't line up with the nisachim. It's not the nisachim and dam that are a pair like the lavoina and the koimetz. It's, if anything, it's the nisachim and the emurin, because the emurin are the achilas hamizbayach and the nisachim are the shtiyas hamizbayach. Zoktamur adarabba. I hold that maybe the shidduch is dam and nisachim. Why? Because kapara v'simcha. The dam is mechaper. What do you do? What does a yid do after he gets a kapara? He's misameach. How are you misameach? With yayin. So adarabba, kapara v'simcha. As Rashi says, adarabba, l'tzarech dam also. The nisachim are buddies with the dam. The hachi urcha leachar kaparas dam shekiper alachet b'hayayin hamisameach elokim v'anoshim. The mission is chaper chetoi sameach. Someone who is zoicha to a kapara, he is a happy man. It's time to celebrate. So zog to Gemara, I'll tell you why. It's not levaina. El levaina ba ima bekli echad. The reason why levaina is different, even though it's a buddy with the mincha, the levaina requires the same halacha of melicha as the kaimitz, because it's ba ima bekli echad. But nesachim ain't ba in bekli echad. So just being a buddy, that's not enough to be mechayiv and to learn from levaina, because the levaina is in one keli with the mincha. It's hukva together, but the nesachim with the dam do not have that relationship. Avol eitzim, but eitzim is a yagud tzvara. Anything that needs eitzim, avol eitzim keheched miskasher behu mincha. Just like the mincha requires the eitzim to be mekasher, so you could be makrib the kaimetz. Hachay miskasher behu kula karbanos. It's a doima b'doima. It's a similar comparison. The comparison of the mincha to the levaina is not similar to the comparison of the dam to the nesachim. But the comparison of the mincha towards the eitzim is very similar to the relationship between all the karbanos that you're makrib and the eitzim. And therefore, that's the right comparison to make. That's the right feature to say is dominant when we're talking about the klal prat to klal, and we're looking for ke'ena prat. The feature we're looking at is it requires eitzim to burn it. Freik the Gemara, maybe look at a different feature of the mincha and be marba a different set of karbanos that require melicha. Ve'ema maha prat mufurish sha'acherim boin choyvaloi umateres. A mincha has two features. Sai, the prat requires acherim choyvaloi, needs eitzim, but it's also materes. The kaimet is mater the shirayim. So maybe the only thing you will say needs melicha, something that has these two features, afkol shacherim boin choyvaloi umateres, which excludes all of the hakravas emurim. It excludes all that because they are not matirim, they are hutar. So what will it include? Umayniu levoina haba b'vazichin. The only other thing that would be included, that would be comparable, that has these two features, are the levoina that are brought to be matir, the lechem aponim. Sai, they need eitzim to burn, and sai, the shari lechem, they're matir the lechem aponim. And maybe that's the only item that we should learn out of the klal pratu klal, because it shares both features of the mincha. Avol midi achrin aloi. But all the other items in the list of the brisa, maybe they shouldn't have a chiyuv melach, because they only share one feature, the feature of requiring eitzim, but they don't share the second feature, that it's a matir. Zok to Gemara, Zok to Gemara, I'll bring you a raya that anything that shares even one feature with the mincha is mechuyev in melach. How do I know? Because remember we asked, what about dam? Dam also has this mila, because dam is a matir. So what did the Gemara, what did the Brisa say? The Torah had to say, dam does not need salt, don't compare it to mincha. Why would I compare it to mincha? It only shares one feature, that it's a matir, but it doesn't share the feature that it needs eitzim. The Torah had to be memayid dam, mechlal dahanach kulu also b'chatzad. You see from here that the Torah wants to include anything that shares even only one feature with the mincha will be included in the rule of a chiyuv melach. That's why the Torah had to say the exception is dam, because even though the dam shares one feature with the mincha, it still doesn't require melach. But all the other karbanos that are not matirin, but they require eitzim to burn them, they do share one feature with the mincha, and they will require melach. Gewaltig. Amar Mar. We're going to analyze another part of the Brisa. We darshan me'al menachos v'loy me'al damcha. The meat of me'al menachos is me'mayit dam. There's other things that maybe we should be me'mayit rather than be me'mayit dam. Ve'ema me'al menachos v'loy me'al eivarecha. Adarabah, maybe it's being me'mayit eivarim, and it's including the dam. Zog to Gemara mistavra eivarim hava leila rabuye. The eivarim are much more similar in many ways to the Hakravas HaKoimates. Why? Because it has 6 similarities. Shechein, Aleph, Shin, Beis, Nun, Tomei. That's the siman. So let's go through them. Aleph is Acherim Boin Chayvala, Kamoisa. It shares one thing that it needs to eitzim. Ishim Kamoisa. It's burnt on the Mizbeach, unlike Dam, it's just spritzt on the Mizbeach. Bechuz Kamoisa. The only place you're ever makter Emurim, are on the Mizbeach HaChitzon. But dam, yes, sometimes you spritz it on the Mizbech HaChitzon, but sometimes you spritz it on the Mizbech HaPnimi, sometimes you spritz it on the Paroiches, sometimes you even spritz it l'fnai v'l'fnim. Noiser k'moiser. There's no din noiser by dam, but there is a din noiser by all of these Eivarim. Tumah k'moiser. If you eat one of these Eivarim when you're tummy, there's a chiyuv kares. But if you eat dam when you're tummy, you don't have a chiyuv kares for the tumah. And me'ila kamaisa, you're moyel in the Eivarim, but there's no din me'ila by dam, as Rashi says, we learn out of Psukim in Yuma. So there are 6 similarities that Eivarim share with mincha that are not shared with dam. Zok Gemara Adarabah, I'll show you similarities that dam has with the mincha that the Emurim don't have. Adarabah, dam hava leila rebuye. Shekein mater kamoisa. Dam is a mater like the koimit is a mater, unlike all the emurim. And nivsal b'shkia sachamo. At shkia, the dam is possible. You cannot make zrikas a dam past shkia. You cannot makter a koimit past shkia. But aktoris emurim, you can do kol halayla. So that's similarity number 1. So we have 2 similarities, mater kamoisa and nivsal b'shkia kamoisa. So that's more true, but Hanach Nevishan. Here you have 6, here you have 2. Avada, you're going to say that the Emurim are more doima to the Mincha because they share 3 times as many similarities. It's 6 to 2. Gewaltig. Omar Mar, we're weiter analyzing another chelik of the Brisa. Shemei ani afilu eitzim v'dam shenikru carbon. I would assume that if it didn't say the special miyut of the klal prato klal, I would have thought that even eitzim and dam are mechuyev to have melicha. Frag the Gemara, man shamet lei the amar eitzim ikri carbon. Who holds that eitzim is a carbon? Who holds there's such a thing as a carbon eitzim, as bringing just eitzim as a carbon? Zok Gemara Rebbe. That's Rebbe. But the problem is, le Rebbe mibayil b'hu melach. According to Rebbe, you actually have to salt wood that you bring for a carbon. So our Brisa says you don't have to salt wood for a carbon. Rebbe is the one who holds that you could bring wood as a carbon, and Rebbe says you do have to salt it. So how does that stem? The Tanya we learned, carbon, Malamed shemisnadvin eitzim. You can actually be noidiv eitzim for a carbon. The kama, how much is a matana of eitzim? It's shnei gezarim, it's 2 pieces. V'cheinu oimer, and you find a pasuk in the Nehemiah that talks about such a carbon. V'agoyroloi seipalnu al karbon eitzim. So you see that there was something called carbon eitzim. And the Rebbe takes it further, and he classifies what type of carbon is a carbon eitzim. Rebbe Yomar, eitzim is a carbon mincha. When you bring eitzim, it's like a carbon mincha. Uta'unin melach, and it needs melach. Not like the brisa that we had. Not only that, the tu'un nagosha. Just like a mincha, you bring it to the southwest corner of the mizbeach. When you bring a carbon eitzim, you're going to do the same. And even weiter, v'amaravel divrei Rebbe, eitzim tu'un kamitza. You have to make a kamitza on the eitzim. I'm not sure how you would do it. Maybe you grind it down, but you make a kamitza on the eitzim gufa.
We bring out a piece.
Eitzim tzirichem eitzim. Eitzim need eitzim too. You need to bring eitzim to burn these eitzim. So it's shver, if this is going according to Rebbe, which it has to be going according to Rebbe, because Rebbe is the man, the Amr, who holds such a thing as carbon eitzim, it would need melach. Yet our brisa says it doesn't need melach. Zok Kamar, you're right. Sami mikan eitzim. You'll have to remove eitzim from the brisa because it doesn't stim take. But the problem is we brought a pasuk special to be memayed eitzim. V'el akrala mutimai. Ilmute dam, if it's coming to be memayed to dam, we already had an exclusive pasuk for the dam. Miyal menchoscha nafka. Zok the Gemara, afik eitzim v'ayol nesachim. You're right. You have to put it in the nesachim. Nesachim is what we are memayit from the klal prat to klal, that it's not doime to mincha. Nesachim, they don't need wood to burn, and it's nesachim that doesn't need melicha. That's how we'll have to amend the brisa. The Tanya we learned, aval hayayin, v'hadam, v'ha'etzim, v'ha'ketoyres, all of these ein to'unin melach. So who is the author of this brisa? Mani. Rebbe, if it's Rebbe, kasha eitzim, because Rebbe says eitzim does require melach. Rabbanon, if it's going according to Rabbanon of our Mishnah, kasha k'toris. Our Rabbanon said that a k'toris avada does need melicha, because it's a zach that needs eitzim to burn it. So who is this Tana? Hi Tana, who the Tanya? This is who it is. It's Rabbi Yishmael b'noi shel Rabbi Yochanan ben Broika Omer Maha Prat. So he has a whole different shot in the klal prat to klal. And he doesn't look at the feature that we looked at, that it requires eitzim. And therefore it would include eitzim, and it would include all the emurim and all the kabbalas. No, he looks at it differently. He holds ma prat, the carbon mincha, mefurish davar shemekabel tuma. The mincha is mekabel tuma. And the oila ishim, and it's burnt. V'yeshno ha-mizbech ha-chitzayin, and it's placed on the mizbech ha-chitzayin, which would exclude, which should include the Torahs that are going to Mizbech HaPnimi. Av kol davar mekabel tuma va'oila leishim v'yesh shel mizbech hachitzayin yatzu eitim she'ein mekabel tuma. Rashi asks, what do you mean eitim are not mekabel tuma? They are mekabel tuma. The Gemara brings a pasuk in Pesachim. So to Rashi, that's only midirabanan because of chibas hakodesh. But midiraita it's not mekabel tuma. Yatzu dam v'yayin. They're not burned, they're just poured on the mizbeach. Gewalt. Zog to Gemara. Let's go back to dam. There was a havamina that dam was going to require melicha, and the reason why the Brisa said it doesn't need melicha is because there's a special meat in the pasuk. Frank the Gemara, dam couldn't possibly have melicha, and I'm going to show you why. At the time of the might to krala dam. The only reason why the dam doesn't need melicha is because of the special pasuk. Are you telling me that otherwise I would have thought the dam needs melech? Kivan the molche, when you salt something, it's mamish like cooking it, right? Melich have a kareseach. So the nafik limiter is dam. It loses its name of dam. How do you know cooked dam is not dam? The Amar Aziri, Amar B'chanina, dam shabishloi. If you cook dam, and Rashi says it doesn't make a difference if it's dam of chulin or dam of kochim, and you're over a love. If you drink that blood, you're not mukhiyah for eating blood. Rabbi Yehuda Amar Aziri, dam shamalchu, and you're over a love. So you see, it's not a dam. If it's not dam, how could you possibly say dam needs melech? If dam needs melech, it's not dam. You can't put it on the mizbeach. So the whole thing doesn't make sense. What? It extracts it, doesn't eat it. It extracts it. That's when you salt meat, it pulls the dam out. So to Gemara, that's a dumb question. So to Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda Didei Amar, Rabbi Yehuda had his own limit as well, that a vorim shet salon vehelon ein bohem mishum l'reich nechoyach. Once you already roasted the meat and it's not sizzling anymore and it's dry and you put it on the mizbech, that's oish reich nechoyach. Reich nechoyach is it sizzles. So the question is, what's the havamina that dam should require malicha? Zok to Gemara, ma'od tema mishtabu mashu l'mitzvah ba'alma. Avada, the havamina wasn't that you'd have to salt it heavily, like a jubika or seach, because in fact that would take away the shem dam. It means you salted a little bit to be mekayim the mitzvah melach, but not enough that it would lose its identity as dam. Kamash on the pasuk that even that you don't have to do. So Baruch Hashem, we were zoicha to finish Daf Chaf, and Be'ez Hashem tomorrow we're going to learn Daf Chaf Aleph. And shortly at 8 o'clock, the Olim from Rabbi Finkelshire are joining us, and we're going to continue from where we left off on Thursday night. Agitavach, everybody. Agitavach, Hamasal Dikavach.